What I'll be doing in this video is showing an example of geomodeling using the extruded footprint method. And I'm going to go through this twice. The first time through, I'm just going to go through the motions. And the second time, I'll do the same model. I'll take a little bit longer and explain why I'm doing what I'm doing. So without further ado, I will go ahead and get started. And that is about it. Of course, you probably want to save this earlier than later. I've already got one of these on my desktop because I've, of course, done this more than once. There you go. So how long did that take me? Let's see how long my screen capture is. 13 minutes. And of course, I don't expect everyone to do it that fast, but I just wanted to cover the main steps. And what we've got here is a very bare bones, minimally effective geomodel. And we've only used textures that are available in the Google Street View mode. And I did a little bit of photo editing. And I've very carefully used my geometries. Notice that I didn't push back each one of these little bump outs, just the door. You know, it's going to be up to you. Should you pull those back? You have to decide if it actually aids in the viewing of this or if it's just extra resources inside of the file. So, you know, that would be reasonably well. Also notice on the back I just kind of cheated because I couldn't get back there. Let me go through that exact same steps with a little bit of commentary. So I'll start with a new file. You have to have the Google toolbar open, which is underneath View and Toolbars. And the very first button that you want to click is this upper left-hand one, which is Add Location. Now, you can just go ahead and type in an exact address, or you can just get close and navigate around. So what I did, you know, if you'd like to try to follow along with this example, I went to Fargo, zoomed back a little bit, and there is a building directly west of the push pin here when you first zoom into Fargo. Right here, it's a little market of some sort, green market. So, you know, I fit it in this window reasonably well, and I hit Select Region and hit Grab. This does a few really, really important things. One, it brings in a scaled plan. So if I were to measure that car, you know, it would be the length of a car. What do we got, 15 feet? I'd buy that. If I were to measure, the width of this parking spot, probably be about 9 feet. And it's a lot more because I'm not measuring parallel. Yeah, there we go, 9 feet exactly. So that's really nice. It brings in a scaled base map. The other thing is it automatically geo-tags your model, which is super important because if you want to do something as simple as a shadow study, you can dial in a specific date and you can dial in a specific time. And these shadows are reasonably accurate for this specific point on the globe. Let me back up a little bit here. Go back to my top view. Very first thing you'll want to do is get your axes set up. And notice that this building, it's not quite along the axes. Very rarely will you find models that are exactly aligned to the SketchUp axes. So the first thing I do is try to find something that's squared off, by that I mean 90 degrees, that you can outline. And you've only really got to do this once. So with the pencil tool, I'll come in here and I'll go ahead and do one edge. And then I'll find that perpendicular line. It's so close to the green, you got to be really careful. But once you do have it, you can hold on Shift. Hold on Shift on your keyboard. Got to zoom out a little bit first. There we go. Holding down Shift will lock it in that inference. So now it doesn't matter where I move my mouse. As long as I'm holding down Shift, I can click anywhere as long as it lines up here. And once again, find the perpendicular, hold down Shift. And one last time, find the perpendicular, hold on Shift. Oh, actually, I don't. You know what? I'm going to back up one because from this line, after I was holding down Shift, I should have. Well, it's really hard to find a second time. I need to encourage this by hovering over that because I'm doing this kind of a little backwards. There it is. Now if I hold on Shift, notice I only need to hover over this point up here because I'm inferring directly across. I missed that when I was first tracing this. All right, once that is drawn in, right away, I would just right click and select Align Axes. You can grab the Axes tool. It's a little bit easier to do it this way. Align Axes. Now notice that my SketchUp axis is aligned to that shape. Now, it's accurate in its X and Y directions because this is a scaled base plan, but it's not in the Z. I should probably turn off my shadows too. So what I like to do is just scale it up. You don't even, if you're close, it'll be helpful, but you don't need to be too close because this next step is really a surefire way to get the height right. Now, you could either just know this, you can go out and measure it. This tutorial, if you follow all of the links here, gives you a few different options to estimate the height. But I like to do it this way. Just pull it up, find a surface that has something like a door on it, and then select Add Photo Texture. And that will take you into Google Street View. Now all of this is freely available to create images, 3D models. You just can't resell it, of course, but there's my building. And it's always a good idea to kind of, bounce around on here and try to find the best view. Now last time I didn't do this one. This one might be a little bit better. So I'll go ahead and select this. You can try to zoom in and out. It's too far. That is probably as good as I'm going to get. And I'll hit select region. Now this is a little bit different. When we did this last time, we were just selecting a base. Now I'm actually selecting a face with a face that happens to have 4 corners on it. So that's why we can kind of freeform drag those around. Get that as close as you can and then hit grab. Now this window will stay open. You can either close it or just move it out of the way. And there you go. Now I can tell right away that that is very distorted in the Z direction. So this is where it's useful. You just need to know the height of something. Commercial doors are nice because more times than not, they are 7 feet tall. So I will draw a rectangle around that door, and then I'll use the tape measure tool. I could either draw some helper geometries, or you can do this too. With the tape measure tool, I will click on this bottom segment here, and as I move my mouse, you can see a dashed construction line. So I'll type 7 feet and hit enter. Now that dashed line is exactly 7 feet. Then I will select that surface, grab the scale tool, and I can snap that top handle. So what we've done here is we've scaled the geometries, but we've also scaled the image. I'm essentially stretched the image. Let's go ahead and click in white space. What's nice about that is I can now sample that with the paint bucket tool, holding the right modifier, and I will apply it over here, and that matches up the rest of the geometry. So without knowing a whole lot about this building, we can very quickly figure out about what the height is. So I'll go ahead and erase that construction line and those helper geometries. And we could go around now and do the rest of these. When I fill in these other images, we don't really need to do that because we know the height is correct. But this is really important. If you just do this, it's quick and easy, but if you know some very basic Photoshop editing tips and tricks, you can clean up things like this light post and maybe that sign right there. Before I get too far into that, you'll want to go into your preferences, which is under SketchUp and Preferences on the Mac. On Windows, I think it's Window and Preferences. Either way, locate your preferences, and the very first one is Applications. Now, there's really only one application. Application for editing image files. If this is not set to Photoshop, go ahead and click Choose and just navigate until it does say that. Because when you right-click on that image, you can go to Texture and Edit Texture Image. Now, I did this in the walkthrough that I wasn't talking, and this is actually wrong, doing it this way. Well, I won't say wrong, but not as easy. Because when we imported that, it brought in this same street view that we saw, and it's automatically stretched it in Photoshop. Well, this is a little harder to edit this kind of stuff out using the clone tool. So what I like to do before I do that, right click on this image. Oops, I also did this in the example. Let's see here. Make sure you are in SketchUp. Right click on that image and make it a unique texture. So that just makes it a 4-cornered texture where where the geometries end. So let's hit texture. I'm sorry, make unique texture. Visually nothing happens, but if I were to right click and edit that, now it looks like this. And this makes it a lot easier for when you're using the clone tool. The clone tool you will use a lot. It's that one right there. Make sure it's not the pattern stamp, but the actual clone tool. Now, 2 things with this. You have to define a sample area first, and if you right click, you can change the size of your brush. So just set it to something reasonable. You know, that's much too small, that's a little bit too big. You can choose a soft edge or a hard edge. I like to use a soft edge because it blends a little bit nicer. And you know what, I'm going to say that. So I'll hit escape. Whoops, I do not want to hit escape because that escaped me out of there. How do we get rid of this? Well, I guess I'll just click. There we go. It'll bark at you, but that's okay. So I need to sample an area on the Mac. It's the Option key on Windows. I think it's Control or Alt, but notice the icon changes. I will click. Now if I move my cursor over, I can kind of get a preview of what I'm about to start painting. Now I'll just kind of click and drag and paint along. Whoops, you know, don't want to do that. Control Z. Since this window is the same as this, I'm going to sample this one over here. So I'll sample that corner, kind of use my little ghost overview to line that up, and then I'll click and drag, and you know, I can clean that up pretty good. Now down here, kind of messed up my window, so let's try this again. Option right there, and click and drag. You know what? For a GeoModel, I'll just keep it like that. It's pretty good. Maybe I'll fix that shadow right there instead. So sample that. You know, the angle I chose in the actual walkthrough is probably a little bit better than this one. You know, and here I'll go ahead and make my brush smaller. Sample right here because now I can get a little bit more surgical about that area. And you know what? Since it's too much work, I'm just going to leave that street sign there. But when I close this, and very important, you need to save it. When you go back to SketchUp, you'll see that update. All right, let's try this side over here. So just like before, you can either keep this window open or close it. It'll come back. Right click, add photo texture. And what's neat about this is it always tries to find the best angle. Sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's not. You know, that's that might be as good as we're going to get. As before, kind of go around, see what options you've got. Sometimes the photo texture locks up and it just shows black. Could be an internet thing. If you resize that window, sometimes it kicks it back on. So this one I can zoom in on and get a little bit more detail. Just like before, I will grab this area as accurately as I can. Notice that I'm assuming that that's a straight line. And there's a little jog in the parapet wall here. And you know, that looks pretty good. Grab, and there we go. So right away, you'll start seeing these little hints like right here that'll help you create the geometries for this model. Pull that down. You know, it looks kind of bad over here, but you know, we're just shooting for a very quick geo model. This might just be something back in the context. It might of something else you're designing. It might be something that you're just trying to get the general shape down. There are ways to make this look a lot nicer, and we'll do that later on. Right, so as before, I will right click and I will select texture, edit texture image. Oops, and I also forgot to do this. Right click, make unique texture. Then I will go back, texture, edit texture image. All right. So what I did in here was with the marquee tool or the selection tool, I drew a few boxes over here. And if you hold down Shift, it does an additive select. We've talked about that. That's like a universal add to my selection modifier. And if you hold down on the Mac, it's Option. On Windows, it's probably Alt. That's the subtraction tool. So you can go in here and kind of add and subtract to the selection. But what I've done here is created really a quick mask. So now if I use the clone tool, I'll make my brush larger and I'll sample an area kind of up here. It only draws in that area that I've quickly selected. So, you know, there's all kinds of ways to do a mask in Photoshop. This is a very quick one. It's a fundamental mask. It's not a real technical one. And you know, right here, whoops, you got to be careful because you may end up redrawing a window that you don't want. And I found out it's sometimes easier you have to keep going back and resampling. So I'll paint a little bit, come back here, resample, paint a little bit, come back here, resample. And I'm not being too terribly. You can even sample areas that are in your selected area. And let's deselect that. This spot here is a little bit easier to clone out because I don't really need to mask anything. All right, you know what? Good enough. Close that, hit save. Hit OK for whatever compression settings you might get. And when we come back here, voila. And what's nice about that is you can come back and clean that up later on. So if you just kind of get a rough start to this, it's pretty easy to come back. All right, now this building is relatively easy in terms of geomodeling. You can really geomodel anything. Some are trickier than others. This is an example of where this gets a little tricky, but I only wanted it to be, not tricky enough to be intimidating. Right click, add photo texture. This window pops up, it's aiming the wrong direction. Incidentally, there's the Fargo library, which brings us up to a pretty important point. These are easy to do, but you're at the mercy of the resolution of this imagery, and they tend to be a little outdated. The Google cars can only drive around so much. And additionally, all right, we got all kinds of trees in the way here, and I can't really get a good view. That's all right. As before, just kind of move around. It's a little bit better. If I was in a rush, I could maybe use that view. Yeah, maybe a little bit better. And this view, it's not ideal, but it's a good start. And I did something. I photo matched this whole side, but then I found a better shot for half of this. Now I'll explain why I modeled it the way I did, but this is the same steps I did when I just ran through it. Hit the button up there. Now this time notice that it shows you the shape of the face that you have selected. So that'll just help you align these. Now because this is such an angled shot here, that edge doesn't quite line up, but you know what? Like I say, it's just a very quick model. So you know what? We'll make it work. You really need to, think about, well, what's really important in this? I would say in this type of model, the front facade is the most important, and that looks reasonably well. So this stuff we can kind of fudge a little bit. All right, let's hit grab, move that out of the way. And, looks a little weird, but, if that's just way off in the distance, no one's going to notice. So let's go over here. Let's try this side, the very back side. Add texture photo. And you'll find out quickly that there's not really any good view. There's a sliver of it there. Can't see it from that angle. So two things that I'm noticing here. One is, well, we can't get back there, but who's really going to see that? We can really fake it this time. The other thing I'm noticing is, well, I've got a pretty reasonable view for half of this building, right where that jog is at. So you know what? Even though I can't do the whole thing, it might be worthwhile to just reproject that back half. So in the walkthrough, I closed that. I added a geometry here. That gives me two separate faces. And now I will just select this back one, right click, add photo texture. And it sometimes will reset. So you gotta go back and find that view that looked not quite as bad. All right, this one I think I can zoom in on too. Sure. Select region. And just get as close as you can. You have to really guess on some of these verticals. So this edge over here, I'm just making sure it looks somewhat straight in relationship to these windows. All right, grab, move that out of the way. And, not so bad. Now the center line here, you'll probably want to hide that. And there's that face. So, I think I wasn't quite that off in the walkthrough, but, if that really bugs you and you want that window to line up, you can right-click texture and position this. Now, this is just like examples we've done before. Let's turn those to push pin, or the yellow pins, because I like those better. And I can move that and then drag it. Let's try it again. Move it and drag it down. You know, it's not a whole lot better. Don't get too caught up on that kind of stuff. In fact, I think I liked it better before. Good enough. All right, back to this edge. You know, we still need to take care of that. For things like this, you really gotta, know how and when to fake stuff. You know, for the backside, I am assuming it's going to look something like that. So we'll just borrow that texture. Now I could either borrow this texture directly in the model, or I can come in here and just use the photo selection method like this. Hit grab. You know what? Who's going to check? Looks pretty good to me. And if you really wanted to remove that, the obvious cut and paste nature of this, you could go in here, edit it, and get rid of the garbage. Oop. Or paint some graffiti on here. It's up to you. Don't do that. But you get the idea. Close, save. It only updates that texture, not this one over here. All right, so far it's looking pretty good. You know, this would be a very, very bare bones. One thing that you should probably do, I'm going to get rid of this for a moment, just because it's very easy, is always paste a texture on the roof. And here's how easy that is. Sample the base plan and apply it on the roof. There you go. Now, there's another little piece here that I didn't do yet. I did in the walkthrough, but there's a little bit of a detail. So very carefully, I like to call that some surgical pencil drawing. Draw in a shape up here that I can use to draw a very simple profile, which might look something like that. Go ahead and erase those. And in this example, I just used the push-pull tool and went all the way across. Now you might have a detail like that that goes all the way around. So if that went all the way around the top of this, you'd probably want to use the follow me tool instead. And I didn't do something right there. It went part way around. Let's undo that. But because this is only on the front side, that works well too. Now, you can reuse these textures a lot. So here's an example where I will just sample that front texture and reapply it. Now, how do you sample, or how do you apply this little edge up here? Well, I could sample this. That doesn't quite work. I could sample that. That kind of works, but not really. But this is nice where you can really quickly create textures on the fly. And I like to do this by just drawing a geometry, draw a rectangle around an area, such as this area here. If you can select it, you can make it a unique texture. So if I right click, select make unique texture, grab my paint bucket, sample it, and I click up there, and that just repeats indefinitely. So if I put it on here, I can see how it repeats, but of course we don't want to do that. The one thing you want to remember is just clean up the extra geometries. All right, speaking of geometries, a geomodel is really a nice combination of minimally effective geometries and textures to convey a building. So, you'll need to decide, well, what level of detail is good enough? Should I include every single brick, or should I just have one giant facade? Well, here's an example. I would probably say it would make sense to at least push-pull this back a little bit because it's obviously recessed. Would I go so far as to push-pull these guys back just a few inches? Probably not. But by doing that, you run into little things like this. Well, the inside textures here and on the other side get a little bit off. If you had an angle, you could do the whole right-click, add photo texture, but I'm going to hit escape because here's another situation where if you just look around your model and I see this area over here, well, that's a pretty nice little texture I can just borrow. So I will draw geometries around that, right click, make unique texture, sample it, come over here and apply it. And you know what, I don't like that edge right there, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut that in half. Do this with this one, make unique texture, sample it, and yeah, not a whole lot better, but who's going to be looking in there anyway? And as before, remember to clean that up. So, you know, this is pretty reasonable, a very effective, very minimal geomodel. Just a couple points of, you know, pretty easy to do. I probably wouldn't go any further than this in terms of detail, but, you know, roofs aren't completely flat like that. There's usually a parapet wall or some sort of pitch. Well, this one's pretty easy to fix. I'll use the offset tool, start the offset, and I'll just type 1 feet, hit enter, and I'll double click down here. So then it's just a matter of push-pulling that, double click that, and I will push-pull that face back, I will push-pull that face in. I've got a sliver of an extra geometry in there that I need to erase. You know, and the roof probably looks something like that. You know, I'm sure there's more technical sides to it. It's probably slightly angled, but just for a very quick model, you know, that works pretty well. Now, you know, again with the borrowing of textures, this is starting to probably go above and beyond. You know, this is getting into, you know, if you're really looking to impress me, you could do it this way. I will create a unique texture off of that shape, sample it, and just come in here and paste it on these edges and maybe on the top and bottom. There we go. Now, you know, we've got some units, some air handling units up here. You know what? Why not? Let's draw those just because it's a very easy push-pull. And as landscape architects, you may wonder, if you are a landscape architect or a landscape architecture student, well, why would you even bother with this? Why are we doing a building? Well, it's really all about context. You know, this is creating the context that adds to the environment that is landscape architecture. Landscape architecture is, of course, not about objects, it's about environments. Oops, and I forgot to clean that geometry up. And furthermore, on air handling units, well, if you ever get into rooftop gardens, it's good to know where this stuff is at. And for a really good example, you could look at the rooftop and read up on the ASLA headquarters in Washington, D.C. and some of the issues they had to deal with when they created their rooftop garden. And without explaining all the details about it, they had to think about where the air handling units were and how they had to be incorporated. So there you go, you know, just a few little bits of information to add detail. I don't know if there's a whole lot more that I would do to this. Again, this is not a perfect model. It is a fairly effective geomodel. And if you wanted to upload this to the 3D warehouse, you would need to create an account and hit this button right here. When you do that, you would be prompted to add some details about this. But if you just wanted to preview this in Google Earth, that's what that button is for right there. And if you hit that, Google Earth will start up. And this is just all saved locally on your computer. If you have your 3D buildings layer turned on, you'll see this in the context of all of the other buildings. So you can see, whoops, I ended up inside of something. Form building. Let's get my bearings down here. There it is. You know, in terms of these other geomodels, it fits in pretty well. Go ahead and close that, and I won't save that. And of course, you need to save this. I won't go ahead and save it again. But again, you know, there's all kinds of reasons why this is helpful. You might use it just to set up a really quick perspective that you would trace. You might just need it for context. You might need it for nothing more than just estimating the height of a building or doing a shadow study. Because this, of course, greatly affects the type of plants and where the plants happen. So with that, I will end, and if you have any questions, as always, let me know.